A little over a month ago now, I made a video called Reading Negative Elden Ring Reviews, and you guys really seem to like that video, so today we're going to be reading negative Dark Souls 1 reviews. Now, for those of you that don't know, there is two versions of Dark Souls 1. There is one, the original on the PS3, the 360, and PC, and then there's Dark Souls Remastered, which is also on PC, and then Xbox One and PS4. To get the most accurate negative reviews as possible, we're going to be going through and reading the negative reviews for the PS3 version of the game. So without further ado, let's go ahead and read through some of these. Some of these are upwards of 12 years old. This is undoubtedly not a game for everyone, as I discovered. I read all the warnings about the difficulty and the unforgiving gameplay, but figured it still sounded like my sort of game. It just isn't, and I'll tell you why. This is a game where you die a lot, and each time you do, you'll redo a lot of the stuff you've just spent 30 minutes doing. 30 minutes doing. Somebody hasn't been keeping their eyes open enough for the bonfires. Even for the most slow, tactical, methodical player in Dark Souls, there should not be a 30-minute loss of time. So if anything, that's on you for not keeping your eyes peeled enough for the bonfires that are literally everywhere. And whilst you're redoing it for the second time, you'll probably die again, meaning you'll have to do it all again, and then you'll probably die again, and so it goes on. Honestly, skill issue. I hate being that guy because it's like one of the most toxic things you can say, but I'm sorry, that's what it comes down to. It's a skill issue, and if you don't feel like learning the game, then I don't know what to tell you. Games have always been tough, man. You want to know another game that this mindset could apply to? Donkey Kong Country on the SNES, Super Mario World on the SNES. Those are games that, you know, they're not necessarily the most brutal and challenging games in the world, but for example, something like Donkey Kong Country, you know, it's a little bit more on the challenging side, at least compared to like Super Mario World, but when you die in that game or when you run out of lives, if you haven't hit a checkpoint, guess what? You got to do the level all over again, and there's many games that follow this philosophy, and I would say Dark Souls is actually rather forgiving compared to some other games where you have to die and redo stuff, because in other games, you know, you get checkpoints more frequently, or you also have games where there's manual save states, and furthermore, with the way that checkpoints work in most games, when you die at a checkpoint and have to restart, all of the progress that you made, you'd have to like redo again. However, in Dark Souls, if you die and get sent back to the checkpoint, which in this case would be a bonfire, you know, any of the items that you went through and collected, you still have those in your inventory even after dying, and then your souls are still there for you to go back and get, and sometimes that can actually work in your favor. Say, you're going through an area like Sen's Fortress, and you defeat the lizard people each and every time that you die and go back through. Well, by the time that you go back to get your souls, say that you've died 3 times before that, well, you're gonna have 3 attempts of that area, like that equivalent in souls waiting for you. So say if you go through and each time you get, oh, I don't know, like 5,000 souls for defeating all of the lizards. Well, if you died like 3 times before that and now you're going to get your souls back, guess what? You got 15k souls waiting for you. And if you manage to get those and then you defeat the rest of the lizard people and you actually make it through the area that time, well, then you just have 15k extra souls to go and dump on levels that you wouldn't have had before. And trust me, by the time that you're in Sen's Fortress, in terms of progression in the game, that's easily at least like 2 or 3 levels right there, which does make a difference. So the concept of dying and having to repeat content isn't really that punishing in this game. In fact, in some instances, it actually helps you in a way. None of this would be a problem if I felt like I was being rewarded for my time spent playing, but you just don't. Okay, that's actually factually incorrect, but in fact, each time you die, you have less to fight with the second time round, and this ties into my biggest problem of all. I keep reading about the hardest game ever made, maybe so, but isn't gaming meant to be fun? This game quite isn't. I turn on my PS3 for escapism, whether it's for 10 minutes or 4 hours. All Dark Souls offers is frustration. The 4 or 5 hours I spent playing were some of the most miserable I can remember. And again, this just kind of speaks to the ignorance of this player and their unwillingness to learn the game. Dark Souls, it's not so much about the difficulty, and you know, I don't necessarily blame this reviewer for mentioning the whole, you know, the hardest game ever made thing, because, you know, that is kind of the gaming journalist's fault, and you gotta remember, you know, this review was posted in 2011, so that's when everybody was like, oh my god, this is the hardest game ever made, you're not gonna be able to beat this game. But the thing about Dark Souls is it's not really challenging in like a, oh my god, this is so hard kind of way. It's more like challenging in a, okay, this is, how am I gonna overcome this? You know, it's sort of like a puzzle, like, how am I gonna solve this? How do I get around this? How am I gonna beat this boss, this area, etc.? So for example, it's something like Sen's Fortress. Say you're stuck there, and the thing that you're stuck on is the area, you know, all like the swinging blades and stuff. The puzzle for that area would be, how do I time my movements? When do I need to stop? When do I need to move? Do I attack this enemy? Do I run past this enemy? And you know, it's like, it's one big puzzle that you have to work out. And when you think about it like that, that logic can be tied to literally any game in existence. Literally even the most simple of games, like Scribblenauts. It's one giant puzzle puzzle to figure out how to get to the solution. Super Mario World, you know, again, that's basically just like one giant puzzle. Like, where do I need to jump? Where do I need to land? Do I need to take out this Goomba, or can I jump past him? Do I need this Koopa shell to take out this giant row of Goombas, or can I just run past that one as well? Say you're playing Super Mario Bros. On the DS, you know, you can save one of your items down on the bottom screen. So say you have like a fire flower, like, okay, when do I need to use that? Can I use this now, or do I need to save it later? Every game kind of has elements of that, and if you're not willing to learn the game, well then, I don't know, that's really on you. And saying that all Dark Souls offers is frustration tells me that this person probably didn't even make it to Undeadburg, and if they did, they didn't get past Undeadburg. Just from reading this review, I have a feeling they went to the Catacombs, New Londo Ruins, and they possibly didn't even make it to the Burg. A huge amount of effort has gone into the game. It looks absolutely stunning and generates an incredible atmosphere, but that's not enough for me. My advice, rent before you buy. I've already traded my copy in. Again, that's on you for not wanting to see it through to the end. That's just your own ignorance, and you're robbing yourself of an experience, but I know this review will get marked as unhelpful because it really is. It's just kind of a lot of emotional bashing on the game more than actual constructive, objective criticism, but I think it would be to someone who isn't already a Demon Souls fan, as I can see so many of the people leaving high scores on here are. Yeah, but see, this review really isn't helpful because it just more kind of highlights their ignorance and their unwillingness to learn the game rather than any objective or constructive criticism against the game. You not feeling rewarded for your time spent playing is completely subjective. People find different kinds of gameplay and different outcomes from their gameplay and inputs to be rewarding, so using that as something to, like, you know, to hold against the game, that doesn't work. And then this whole conversation about the hardest game ever made and isn't gaming meant to be fun, that doesn't really hold up because every person is different. Everybody's gonna find different things to be fun. And while yes, some of the things that I'm saying do definitely sound a little bit hypocritical, it's hard for me to put into words what I'm trying to say, honestly, because, you know, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the best at this, but if you understand what I'm trying to say, then you understand what I'm trying to say, because, like, if you read this review, there's not a whole lot of constructive and objective criticism that they're actually giving towards the game to actually be a helpful review to explain why some people may not be into this game. They're more or less just emotionally bashing this game. Like, if you sum up this first paragraph, it's them just talking about, well, I suck at the game and I died a lot, and then this one they're talking about, well, I didn't feel rewarded because I kept dying and I suck at the game. All in all, you know, nobody take this the wrong way. You know, I respect these people for, you know, having the guts to go on the internet in the first place and, you know, leave at least a somewhat thoughtful review of their thoughts on the game and their experience with the game. But there does come a point where these people need to realize that they are their own worst enemy, and they are truly the only ones that they have to blame for not being able to understand and truthfully learn the game. Oh, this person's name is Grumpy Reviewer. This was left October 30th, 2012. This will be a good one. Let's be honest for a second here. Seriously ask yourself, do I really like this game, or am I really enjoying this? Personally, yeah, Dark Souls 1, it's one of my favorite RPGs of all time, and probably in like my top 10, top 15 games of all time. I think Dark Souls is a perfect example of psychological marketing, okay? Developers and the media made us believe that suffering exhaustively with some sort of do it again until you get good at it business is something nice, something we want, the ideal gaming experience. It's not. Dark Souls is, no question about it, a beautiful game, challenging and well crafted, yes. That being said, the difficulty level is just way too high. I'm sorry, but that's a skill issue. Dark Souls, you know, I died a couple times during my first attempt. I got stuck on Ornstein and Smough for admittedly way too many hours, but outside of that, Dark Souls 1, man, it is really not that hard of a game. In fact, it is one of the easiest Souls games. Again, if it's, you know, your first Souls game, like, yeah, you're gonna die a bit. I mean, I definitely did. But it's not that hard. This isn't like Sekiro levels of difficulty, for example, where you literally have no option but to overcome it. Like, there's always a way in Dark Souls. And if you never found that way, and if you weren't able to complete the game, that just speaks to your unwillingness to learn the game and its mechanics. The way I see it, video games are an art form, and there shouldn't just be, like, one cutout that developers have to follow in order for it to be considered, like, a fair or well-designed or accessible game. Because, like I said, the way I see it, you know, video games are an art form, and it's on you as the player to take on that game, learn the game, learn its mechanics, learn how to play it. Some games hold your hand and tell you exactly how to play it and how to get from point A to B, and then other games don't. Dark Souls just happens to be one of those games. And yet, I bet these same people are the same ones that go and praise basically, like, I don't know, any Zelda game like Breath of the Wild. Don't get me wrong, I love Breath of the Wild, but I mean, it's the exact same kind of game. It doesn't hold your hand, it doesn't point you where to go, and it's on you to learn the game mechanics. So if you play Breath of the Wild and you keep dying to one of the enemies without getting a single hit on the enemy because you won't take the time to figure out which button actually attacks so that you can defeat them, and then you complain about it being too difficult, Whose fault is that? To a point that there's not fun at all to play it. Okay, nice grammar, bud. But we play, we suffer because they made us believe this was the best gaming experience ever. No, you chose to believe that. They advertised you a game and you chose to believe it. You chose to spend $60 on this game. I gave up on Dark Souls as soon as I realized that I just don't have time for this. Well, okay, that's a fair argument if you don't have time for it. Well, if you don't have time for Dark Souls, then how come you had enough time to make a Metacritic account, name a grumpy reviewer, and then, you know, type out like a whole essay? Being a gamer in my 30s, I have pretty much 1 hour per day to play games, and I don't want to spend these precious hours hating myself for hating a game because I cannot have any fun because of frustration. Again, that's on you, that's entirely your fault, but okay, I'm no masochist. Sorry, for me, the ultimate gaming experience is having fun, and, well, personally, I find Dark Souls to be fun, and millions of other fans do, but okay. And there's almost no fun to be had in Dark Souls, sorry. Again, a very objectively and incorrect statement, and this is just 110% false. A better way to word this would be, personally, I don't have time for Dark Souls. I personally can't get into it. I can't enjoy it. This isn't for me. So if there's other gamers out there that don't have the time to sink into something like this, or don't do too well with difficult games, you know, maybe be a little more careful before considering purchasing this game, and that would have been a fair review. But then he comes on here talking about masochism and this isn't fun. And again, if you don't have that much time as is, why are you taking time out of your day to write this crappy review? To start with, let me start by saying that I love a good challenge. I like hardcore roguelikes, and I enjoy Dwarf Fortress. Dude, that is a tongue twister. I enjoy Dwarf Fortress regularly, which is known for its difficulty. The challenge in Dark Souls consists of learning by doing. You have to test your way forth. The tutorial is minimal, and the character attributes do not come with an explanation. This is brutal considering that there is no way to unlevel. Okay, you know what? That is a fair criticism. That is a fair criticism of Dark Souls 1. And once you blindly raise a stat, there's no way back. The gameplay reminds of Oni, with the character moving towards the direction you point with the stick on your controller. The combat requires exact reaction from the player. The time window in order to execute moves is minuscule. Add actions that stack and are executed once the character recovers from his stamina loss / long fall, etc. It will get a confusing control to add to the game's difficulty layer. You know what? That is fair. I will say that is fair. However, on the other hand, you have to realize that this was actually an intended design mechanic and intentional choice on the developer's part. That was a part of the original game's design, and that is why it has stuck around all the way up until the most recent entry with Elden Ring. It stops the player from just spamming the controller and going all crazy. You have to be methodical. You have to think about what buttons you're inputting. It's all about learning the game, learning the dance. When am I going to press this button? When do I need to heal? When do I need to dodge? And, you know, if you could just cancel all your animations in an instant and start doing, you know, like triple backflips and canceling your attacks, not having anything to restrict you from that, yeah, you know, it would kind of strip away from the methodical and deliberate nature of the gameplay. So far, this is a decent review. Let me just keep going with this, because, you know, I'm making some rather fair criticisms of the game. Okay, so I haven't enjoyed this game since I don't see the point of wasting my time without making any progress. Again, that's on you to learn the game, but I'll let that slide. I like the idea of challenges being hard, but since this game's difficulty consists of giving the player minimal information, grind through long distances through same enemies several times once you die, you can't respawn near bosses. Well, I mean, you can, okay, you know, I'll get into that right now. In order to recover your souls and demands flawless execution of actions, which is not entirely without technical faults, this game is not challenging, it's just tiring. Again, that's more of a subjective take. So let me address this point by point. Giving the player minimal information, yeah, the game just doesn't like to hold your hand. Neither did many of the RPGs from the late 90s and early 2000s that most people praise as being some of the best of all time. Think of a game like Morrowind, Oblivion, especially Morrowind. That game does not hold your hand at all. It just kind of says, hey, there's this item and character that you need to meet northwest of this shack, go find it. In fact, I would say games like Morrowind are even less forgiving and even less hand-holding than Dark Souls. Yet, I never see players complaining about that game, but they all complain about Dark Souls. Run through long distances through same enemies several times once you die. You know what? That is a fair criticism if you are stuck on a boss. So for example, if you keep dying on a boss and then you have to go through like Lost Izalith, fight through those enemies again, or at least find out how to evade them, I will say that is a fair criticism, and that is one thing that I do like that Elden Ring did with the State Americas. And then this part about in order to recover your souls and all that, I'm not even going to touch on that. There's plenty of ways to, you know, get souls. Like, by the time that I finish a playthrough in this game, I'm completely over-leveled, I'm swimming in souls, so, I mean, that's just on them. Let's finish out this review. Understand me correctly, I think it's silly that many of today's games hold your hand through the story. Oh, okay, so they do address this. For example, FPS games that let you recover your health just by hiding behind an obstacle. Yeah, you know what? That's not even a fair criticism of FPS games. That's literally just part of the game, man. That's the mechanics. I don't think a game like Call of Duty 4 would be very fun if you literally only had one health bar and then you were just dying like every 20 steps of the campaign. Or RPG games that shows you where the destination to your quest is on a map with a pit. I'm not even gonna lie, I kind of like RPGs that kind of show you where you're supposed to go. You know, it's a nice dynamic. Some games just like to do stuff differently. I don't really think it's fair to hold a way that a game is designed, like, against it in terms of, like, when it comes to basic mechanics like that. But this game is trying the wrong way to give a challenge, which is a pity because this game's visuals is truly beautiful to behold. So I really didn't get a whole lot from this. What, they complained about the way that, like, the input queue works, not making enough progress, not being able to respawn near bosses. It was a review, alright. I did not like this game, but I still finished it, which seems to be relatively unusual. Aside from the difficulty, Dark Souls is pretty average. Yes, it is good looking and atmospheric with a large catalog of combat-related items to collect and manage, but no new ground is broken here, okay? The PvP system is an innovative idea, but ubiquitous latency issues have essentially transformed it into a griefing mechanic for invaders who like to exploit the laggy netcode. I can agree with that. Dark Souls PvP, even their latest entry, Elden Ring, the PvP in those games is absolutely abysmal. I cannot stand it. I do not find it fun at all. The netcode is truly terrible, and it astonishes me that they have not made any effort to improve it since the original Dark Souls. Their game literally just won Game of the Year, and you know, they have these multi-$100 million budgets, and they still can't improve their netcode. That's a little worrisome for me. The difficulty can indeed be refreshing, but reaches diminishing returns when deaths that have little learning value start to pile up. The game gives you a lot of indicators as to how you're dying. That's kind of the things with these games, you know, death is supposed to be a lesson, so again, that's on you for being a bad learner and not learning from your mistakes. These include but are not limited to frumpy hitboxes. This is the wrong game. I think you might have meant to leave this review on Dark Souls 2, because that's the game with the hitbox problem, buddy. Oddly clipping cameras, okay, that's kind of fair for certain bigger enemies, maybe. Not really at all, though. Misinterpreted lock-ons, that's never happened to me once, and other things that are basically normal in an RPG engine but are occasionally pushed to the forefront in Dark Souls. Some areas and bosses become more tedious and challenging, which takes away from the satisfaction of getting through. To be fair, yeah, there is some pretty tedious areas and bosses, especially in the latter half of the game. Crystal Caves, Sen's Fortress, yeah, there's a few iffy ones. I'll give him that, and you know, Bed of Chaos 2, that's definitely a fair criticism. All in all, you know, there were some fair points in this review. Definitely not as bad as the other ones we read, but I don't know, just kind of seems like another grumpy gamer. All right, we got one more review here. I do not get it. When I heard all the great things about this game, I immediately went out to buy it. I regret ever spending money on it. This game taught me to do more research on games. Dude, that is entirely your fault. Look into what you're purchasing. Oh my gosh. I honestly think the only reason people like this game is because of how hard it is. No, that's not the case, but okay. This game is hard, but to me, it's slow and boring. That's completely subjective. It's not really even that slow. Just go with the dex build if you don't like things slow. I mean, that's why it's there. There's ways to be quick in the game. Creating every type of class in the game and played through the game with the different classes just to see if I was missing something. Every time I did not have any fun. Well, then that just sucks to be you, I guess. I do not have a problem with a hard game. I just have a problem with a boring game, and this is a boring game. Completely subjective because I find this game to actually be very fun, very entertaining, and the complete opposite of boring. So don't be out here calling things boring or throwing out all this stuff acting like it's fact, because it definitely is not. So if you are considering getting this game, then rent it first, because what people are praising this game for may be the only thing they like about it. Okay, great grammar. That's fair. I mean, if, you know, if a game's like $60 and it's brand new and you're unsure as to if you actually like really want it and you've just been hearing great things about it, and you know, like, say if a game like God of War Ragnarok's coming out, for example, and you liked the original God of War, it would make sense to go out and buy that immediately. But for, you know, at the time that this was released, you know, a relatively new series like Dark Souls, you know, you've just been hearing great things about it, but you don't know anything about it. Yeah, totally, that makes sense. Just go rent it, make sure you actually like it first, you know, especially if it's a game like this, you know, has a bit of a learning curve to it. Yeah, that's totally fair. But again, you know, you should just be researching what things you're purchasing in the first place, or at least being sure that you want to purchase said things. Anyway, I can already feel all the brain cells leaving my head, so I'm just gonna leave this here. You guys have any thoughts on the negative reviews? You guys have any hot takes about Dark Souls? Do you have any other games that you'd want me to read negative reviews on? Whatever you're thinking, I'd love to hear from you guys. But anyway, as always, a shout out to the patrons and channel members: Karma's Fave, Grandma, Lil Bitty Tab, Big Daddy, Matty, Chulupasaurus Rex, Razak, Polar, Ray, Webster, Lil Mouse, Bianca, Spurgatory, Drip Cassant, Mellow, Laskin, Cupid, Magic, Miss Inner, Vintage, Y15, Fleming, 71, Aaron Reynolds, and Unknown. Thank you guys for watching. Have an amazing day. Stay beautiful. I love you all. And remember, don't go hollow. Peace.